Joining us now, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the Washington Post, Carol Leonnig, who wrote a book last year specifically on the Secret Service. Carol, what questions do you have, given this latest information that they only could provide one text exchange and the others are gone?
Yes, Mika, it's really a mess. Secret Service sources told me late, let's say early yesterday morning and late the night before, that there would be basically no new information coming to Congress. They knew after scouring their records all weekend long, allegedly scouring, that they didn't have anything new or exciting to turn over, because they said all of these texts that they began that began vanishing when they reset phones in January were basically gone by the time an inspector general made his request for records in February. But as you rightfully point out, Congress had other requests already pending in January. And the messiest part for the Secret Service about this, Mika, also you're well aware of, but maybe the viewers are not, is that every agency has a requirement to back up government records one way or another. And in this instance, the Secret Service was nearly incompetent and or sloppy as heck. And the result is individual agents were given a choice. Do you want to back up these cell phone texts? Do you think they're government business? You make the decision, and we'll abide by that.
Oh,
the result
was
that's just ridiculous.
How is this possible? I mean, especially if you look at the Secret Service in terms of forensic recovery, they're very good at this, as you know.
Such a good point. Sorry, such a good point. When you said forensic recovery, I immediately started thinking about all the ways the Secret Service catches bad guys by recovering their cell phone text.
Okay, so how is it possible that all of these phones were deleted as part of this migration? We heard earlier from Olivia Troy, who was part of a lot of these technological aspects of restoring or regaining information, who says there's a lot of thought that is put into device resets. We have the National Archives now asking questions about this. How is it possible they are gone? How is it possible that this is a mistake, an honest mistake?
I don't like to speculate unless I can put it in the paper. You know, the place that I work, the Washington Post, or in the update to my book, Zero Fail, which now it looks like I might have to do. I don't like to speculate, but I'll say that based on all of the interviews I've done thus far, Mika, it seems to me that the Secret Service was incredibly lazy about making sure these were kept. And there may have been people, I won't use any names this moment, I will wait till I publish a story, but there may have been people in the Secret Service who were kind of blissfully happy that this reset was happening, because a lot of things were going to disappear if they didn't store them. And now I will also remind viewers that I've written about text messages on Secret Service agents' phones that I ultimately received and was able to write about. These were not government records. In fact, most of them were salacious efforts by different agents to hit on women that were their subordinates, or try to make dates with their colleagues or their bosses. And so there's a lot of non-government stuff on these texts. And I can see why agents wouldn't say, oh, I'd like to upload all of this to our agency file. A lot of it that I've read was pretty damning and humiliating. And I've published some of it in my book. I think
Carol,
this...
Oh, I'm sorry,
go ahead, Joe. No, I just think...
Okay, I'll go. We have a little slight delay, and then I'll let you finish up. So, obviously, you can't draw the conclusions that we can draw while you're following the story until, like you said, you can write it and publish it and get it past editors of the Washington Post. But that said, for most Americans that are looking at this, you have a Secret Service that knew. They were at the heart of what happened on January the 6th. They understand, like we all understood at the time, that this was an unprecedented event where the President of the United States attempted what I call a fascist overthrow of an American election, and that he wanted to go up to Capitol Hill. He wanted to join the rioters. He wanted to lead them in to the Capitol, and he wanted to stop the vote of the electors. And his own lawyer said, stop that from happening, because if it happens, we're going to be charged with every crime under the book. And so Cassidy Hutchinson talks about the conversation that was had after they came back, that he was grabbing at the wheel to get up to the Capitol, that he was lunging at Secret Service members. And so we could have known all the details behind that with these text messages. We could have known all the details about the movement of Mike Pence, how they were trying to get Mike Pence out of there. And under normal circumstances, it could be put away to laziness, sloppiness, bureaucratic bungling. But this was January 6th. This was a one-off event. And you have a Secret Service that has been politicized based on great work by reporters like you, politicized by Donald Trump. So how do Americans not draw the conclusion that this was a cover-up?
Joe, those are exactly the right questions. And I'll tell you this, there's an arrogance that runs through the Secret Service and an effort always to cover up anything that would be embarrassing, humiliating, or just as importantly, to cover up anything that's bad about the president. Because remember, sometimes the Secret Service becomes kind of not just a protector of the president's body, but a protector of the president's secrets. And as you know, and as I've reported, the Secret Service was tragically, to a degree never seen before, politicized by Donald Trump. People around him, his Secret Service detail, and of course, as you've noted, Tony Ornato, a Secret Service executive who came temporarily a White House political advisor to Trump, an enabler of everything Trump wanted to accomplish, a person who got the Secret Service in line to deliver what Trump needed, even if it violated rules, protocols, and possibly laws. The effort by the Secret Service is always, these are our secrets. You don't have any claim to them. But actually, the law says we do have a claim to them. And I can imagine a lot of Secret Service executives, even the director, wanting to put this chapter behind them. Not saying delete the records, but, oh, isn't it convenient? This stuff's going to go away. And they were then going to be the new employees of Joe Biden, who was already distrustful of the Secret Service. But it's the arrogance and the desire to keep their own secrets by the Secret Service that have us in this mess. And you mentioned 4 things we could figure out or potentially corroborate, all of them pretty important. Did the president attack a Secret Service agent and lunge for a wheel inside his Suburban on January 6th because he was so angry he couldn't join his supporters? Did he say he wanted his supporters to be armed with firearms when they came to the ellipse on January 6th and to march with him with heat packing? What else could we have learned in these texts that even goes beyond the amazing points that you raised?
So the Washington Post. Oh, go ahead.
Mike Barnicle.
Mike, sorry. Go ahead,
so,
Mike.
Carol, as you know more than most, the White House Protective Detail, they're human beings. And they come to like some presidents and dislike other presidents. I'm thinking in terms of the like category, George H.W. Bush, who was beloved by his Secret Service detail, to your point about you're working for a human being who you really like. So my question to you is on this one, as the politicized protective detail around Donald Trump, and what happened has happened, and we've been talking about it all morning. You're an expert on it. What's your instinct on this? Is it the Secret Service detail trying to protect itself, trying to protect Trump, or both?
The deletion of the records, Mike, I'm going to put in one side aside for a moment to answer your question, because we don't know whether or not this was just a stupid screw up or something a little more intentional. We don't know yet. And I, again, won't speculate. But it is clear to me that senior leadership and several, and I'm not talking like half, I'm talking about the majority of President Trump's detail, were in the tank for him. They preferred his conservative positions. They usually are viewed, the Secret Service, as putting politics at the door when they walk into the White House to protect the man, the office, and democracy. But in this case, I have seen numerous texts, social media postings by members of the president's protective detail in which they were essentially cheering on the insurrectionists on January 6th. They were posting pictures on their social media platforms of an upside down flag when Biden was allegedly, in their view, elected president. These were people with MAGA hats in their offices. So it was clear that they were very much on Trump's side and not opposed to the challenge of the rightful, fair, and free election. And that is chilling and worrisome and raises new questions afresh about this episode involving the deletion of record.
All right, the Washington Post, Carol Leonnig, thank you so much.